So since we got the information on Vampiric Powers for Season 2, there's been one build I've wanted to try. So this is a Stormclaw build for the Druid in Season 2 of Diablo 4. Now a Stormclaw build for the Druid is fully focused on doing all of your damage through your basic skills, and one of the most important things you need for this build is the Great Staff of the Crone, which its special effect is Claw is now also a Storm skill, and Claw is one of our basic skills, and also casts Storm Strike at up to 150% normal damage. So now whenever we use Claw, it also will cast a Storm Strike, and Storm Strike is another one of our basic skills. So it basically doubles up the amount of basic skills we're going to be casting, and even more than that because the Storm Strike is going to be doing even more damage. Then this weapon also gives you a massive rank increase to Claw as well, up to a total of 9 when this thing is upgraded. So this is the main thing you need for this build to use, but you do also need 2 uniques for this version of a Stormclaw build to actually work. You also need Tempest Roar because your base Storm skills are now also Werewolf skills, so we can stay in Werewolf using all of our different skills. So this build definitely requires some more rare uniques to get. And that brings us to our skill tree, starting with 5 points in Claw, the main ability we're actually going to be using. Upgrade 1 increases its attack speed. Upgrade 2 has a 15% chance to attack twice. So when that procs and Claw is used twice, it also uses Storm Strike twice, which we're also putting 5 points into. Storm Strike also gives us a damage reduction, and it jumps to 3 other enemies. So this also has a cleaving effect to it. Upgrade 1 has a chance to immobilize. Upgrade 2 has a chance to cause enemies to become vulnerable, which is the main way we're constantly applying vulnerable to enemies. Then we're going down 1 point into Cyclone Armor, which also gives us non-physical damage reduction. And then when we use this, it knocks all enemies back, does a little bit of damage. Upgrade 1 causes a knockback to slow, and Upgrade 2 gives us a damage reduction every 10 seconds. Then we have Blood Howl, which is just a heal. Upgrade 1 reduces its cooldown by 1 second per kill. Upgrade 2 gives us increased attack speed for 4 seconds after using it, meaning we can have this increased attack speed for the majority of the time. Then we're getting Debilitating Roar, which is just a damage reduction to all enemies in the area. Upgrade 1 fortifies us. Upgrade 2 heals us for quite a bit. Then we're going down getting Hurricane. This is primarily to proc other effects. Upgrade 1 slows enemies. Upgrade 2 causes enemies to deal 20% less damage. And then we're going down and getting Grizzly Rage, which we're going to be in almost 100% of the time. This is just a massive buff, gives us speed boost, stacking crit. Upgrade 1 gives us unstoppable for 6 seconds. Upgrade 2 fortifies us for 8% of our max life per second. So that's going to be where the majority of our fortify is coming from. Then our capstone, I'm currently using Lupine Ferocity, which kind of got nerfed. Every 6 werewolf skill critically strikes and deals 70% increased multiplicative damage, but this damage increase is doubled against injured enemies. Now this 140% damage increase used to just be against all enemies, but this still does seem to be the best capstone for this build. And then next up we have our passives. Predatory Instinct, increased critical strike chance to close enemies, then increased movement speed while in werewolf form. One of the reasons this build is super strong is because it has crazy quick movement speed. Then 3 into Ancestral Fortitude, increase your resistances by 15%. Then a Vigilance, when we use a defensive, we get damage reduction. We're going to always be able to use a defensive because Blood Howl resets so much. Then we're going down 1 into Elemental Exposure, chance to make enemies vulnerable. 3 into Endless Tempest, so Hurricane is active more. 1 into Bad Omen, which is just another lucky hit that does some damage, primarily to get Electric Shock. This was buffed. It's a lucky hit that has a chance to immobilize enemies for 3 seconds, and if the target is already immobilized, lightning damage dealt to them is increased by 21% instead, so we'll do massive damage to immobilize enemies. Then we're going down 1 into Neurotoxin, so we can get 1 into Toxic Claws. Any crits with werewolf skills cause a poison over time. We don't care about the poison damage, we just care that they're poison. So we can also get Envenom, which you and your companions deal increased critical strike damage. 3 points into this is very good. Also have 3 more on our necklace. Then we have 3 into Defiance. Nature skills deal increased damage to elites. And then next up we have our Spirit Boons, starting with Wariness, take reduced damage against elites. Sight Talents for increased critical strike chance. Calamity to increase the duration of our Grizzly Rage. Calm Before the Storm, a lucky hit that reduces the cooldown of our Grizzly Rage so we can be in it much more consistently. And then Overload, another lucky hit, dealing lightning damage, has a chance to cause the target to emit a static charge, dealing some additional AoE damage. Now, one of the weakest parts about this build is it doesn't have a lot of AoE damage, so things like Overload will help with that quite a bit. Now, Vampiric Powers are one of the main reasons I wanted to try out this build, because some of these are ridiculous for basic skill builds. So first off, we have Moonrise. Hitting an enemy with a basic skill grants you 4% attack speed for 10 seconds, stacking up 5 times, so 20% attack speed almost instantly. Upon reaching max stack, so 5 stack, you enter a Vampiric Blood Rage, gaining 160% multiplicative basic skill damage and 15% movement speed for 10 seconds. And both the effects of this can be on you at the same time, so both the attack speed and the basic skill damage. This thing makes this build's damage absolutely absurd. Then another skill that also ties into that is Ravenous. Another lucky hit, up to a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed for 6 seconds. This will be procced quite a bit. Currently, just standing here, not in werewolf form, I'll be getting 56% increased attack speed. This goes up because we have more movement speed while on werewolf. We have a lot more movement speed while on Grizzly Rage. So just these two effects are going to give us some absurd increased attack speeds and basic skill damage. These two Vampiric Powers are some of the biggest increases in damage any build can get. Then for our other powers, we have Anticipation, reduces our ultimate cooldown by 20%. That's all we really want it for. We have Metamorphosis. When you evade, you become unstoppable for 4 seconds, and moving through enemies with this evade does some damage and inflicts Vampiric Curse. The main reason we're using this is because the only unstoppable in this build was you would get unstoppable for 6 seconds when using Grizzly Rage, so being stunned or being CC'd was an issue, but now with this, we basically have unlimited unstoppable. Then finally, we have Undying. Casting a skill heals you for 3% of your life. Below 50% health doubles this heal. This is absurd, and this will give us a vast majority of our healing, also making this build very strong and have a lot of sustain. And then next up, we have our Paragon Boards. Now, I'm primarily going to be going over my glyphs and board selection, but there'll be a build planner link in the description if you want to follow this point by point. Now, these Paragon Boards aren't optimized yet, and one of the main reasons for that is all of my glyphs aren't leveled up to 15 or even 21, and leveling up a lot of these glyphs is going to give us specifically a lot of increased resistances. So we'll be able to be taking a bunch of points out of different resistance nodes throughout the boards and put them into damage nodes. As those glyphs level up more and more, these points will change a little bit. But starting off, we have the Territorial board, increased damage to close enemies, damage reduction to close enemies. We're in melee at all times, so that's just a big damage increase. Then our first board is Thunderstruck. Storm skills deal increased damage equal to 20% of your damage versus close and damage versus distant. So currently I have 24% increased multiplicative damage. Then the glyph on this board is Earth and Sky, which gives a bonus to magic nodes within range and then increases our nature skill damage to vulnerable and crowd controlled. These type of glyphs are very good for a few different reasons. One of the big ones though being a big increase to dexterity or intelligence to get the secondary effect of rare nodes throughout the board. Then we're going over to the right, taking Heightened Malice. When there are 3 or more poison enemies, you deal massively increased damage, one of the best rare nodes in the entirety of the game. And the glyph we're taking is Fang and Claw, another buff to magic nodes within range. And this one's very good because we get additional damage reduction from poison enemies, which is just a really big damage reduction. Then the secondary effect gives us a pretty massive damage increase while in Werewolf. Then we're going over to the right, we're taking the Lust for Carnage board, but we're primarily just taking this for a glyph. We're taking the Spear glyph, a massively increased critical strike damage, and then critical strikes increase the damage enemies take from us by up to another 12% multiplicative damage. Then we're going back over, going up, we're taking the Inner Beast board, but we're not taking the legendary node itself. We're taking the Undaunted glyph, increased damage while fortified, and damage reduction while fortified. And then a big reason for taking this board is because there are rare and magic nodes that give us increased attack speed. So this rare node gives us 5% increased attack speed when you get the secondary effect. Then 3 other magic nodes give us more attack speed. And this build you really want attack speed with. Then finally, we're going over to the left, and this is where we're just ending with some additional points. And we're using the Outmatch glyph, which I don't even have at 15 yet. This gives us a bonus to rare nodes within range. And then the secondary effect, when I have it, will deal increased physical damage to non-elites and bosses. But a big reason we're taking this glyph with the small amount of points in range is because there is a resistance to all elements rare node here. And once we have this glyph maxed out, this will give us a pretty big increase to all resistances, which will also allow us to take some other points out of some other nodes and put it into more damage nodes. So that brings us to our gems and our legendary aspects. On our weapon, you want basic skill damage. On your gear, you want damage reduction while fortified. And then in your jewelry, you want armor, or you want to use gems to bring up your resistances. You want capped resistances on all, so you can use gems to bring those up as well. Now for our legendary aspects, they're actually pretty simple with this build. They're primarily primarily just stat increases or buffs to our Grizzly Rage. On your necklace, you want basic skills, gain increased attack speed. It'll be up to 45%, which is pretty big. Then on your other offensive aspects, you want Grizzly Rage now shapeshifts you into a dire werewolf, giving you movement speed and spirit cost reduction. The main thing we want this for is the move speed and to make Grizzly Rage usable as a werewolf. Then our other Grizzly Rage aspect is increase the duration, and crits while Grizzly Rage is active increases your critical strike damage up to 200% increased critical strike damage. It used to be 1000%. It was pretty heavily nerfed, which it did need, but this is still very good for this build. Then for our final offensive aspect, up to a 20% chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target for 3 seconds, causing any direct damage you deal to them to pulse additional damage. And this is the other way we deal AoE damage with this build, because this build doesn't have much AoE damage. And then for our other aspects, our chest piece, we want disobedience for massively increased armor. For our legs, we want basic skills grant us damage reduction. This will be up 100% of the time. And then on our boots, we want debilitating roar is now a werewolf skill, and it will immobilize poison enemies. This is primarily so we can use debilitating roar, and debilitating roar is just a really good defensive skill. So we want to be able to use this when in our Grizzly Rage, which is now a werewolf skill, and to being able to just stay in werewolf as long as possible. And then next up, we have our gear stats. Now, when starting to look at your different statting, the first thing you want is you want to be capped with all your resistances. Now, once you get level 100, once you start leveling up your glyphs, you should be able to get the vast majority of your resistances through your passive skills in your skill tree, through your all resist from your Paragon boards, and through the different resistances on your rings and your amulets, which all give resistance to all elements as well. And the point you want to get to is where you don't have really any resistances on your gear, or if you needed just 1 or 2 resistance stats. Now, we need to use Tempest Roar here, which kind of sucks because the poison resistance on this is completely useless, but we need this for the build to work. And then I also have resistance on our boots because fire resistance is actually pretty hard to get. But for our stats, on your chest piece, you want all damage reduction from fortified, from poison, from distance, from close. Any percent damage reduction gonna be good. On your gloves, you want attack speed, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, and your last roll can be any other offensive stats. So critical strike damage with the werewolf skills is pretty good as well. On your legs, same thing, you want all damage reduction, but the first one you want is damage reduction while injured. When you're doing higher tier content, you're gonna get hit really hard for single hits. So this will give us a massive damage reduction while low life. Then on your boots, you want movement speed, another damage reduction while injured roll, then any dodge chance roll against distant, against close, or just dodge chance. I have fire resistance to bring up my fire resistance, so it's at cap. Then on our necklace, movement speed's very good, any damage reduction is good, ranks to envenom is really good, and then I have total armor, which is decent, but I would want that changed to say damage reduction from poison enemies. Then on our rings, you want lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, and max life. I don't have that on this ring. I do have it on this ring, max life, lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, then just another offensive roll, vuln damage, or any critical strike damage roll is also going to be very good. But that is the entirety of this build. And this build is incredibly strong, especially once you get to level 100, because this build has quite a lot less AoE damage than other builds, especially if you compare this to my poison landslide build that I went over in my last build video. That can clear entire screens, have the entire screen spawning massive landslides everywhere. But this build has much less AoE, but once you get to level 100 and you primarily want to skip all the small enemies and only kill elites or bosses, this build is ridiculously good for that because it has crazy movement speed and its burst damage against like bosses or elites is so good. Even at like level 100 nightmare dungeons, you can just run around searching for all the elites, kill the elites super quickly, and move on. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.